Hello class and welcome once again to Beetle University. I of course am Professor Moptop. You of course are greatly appreciated by me. Thank you very much as always for being part of the university. This week we're going to be talking about two Beatles songs from 1965 and from 1966. If you've been collecting all of the weekly Beatle audio, you will notice that we missed a couple along the way. One of them we missed is from the Rubber Soul album. One of them we missed was from the Revolver album. And the two songs couldn't be more different in terms of Beatles songs. One's a John song, which is all John. One's a Paul song, which is all Paul. There's also a lighting issue going on today. I think it kind of looks like I'm at a disco. We're all going to have to deal with it. The first song we're talking about was the first song recorded for the Rubber Soul album. It's called Run For Your Life. It's a John Lennon song. And on October 12th of 1965, they started recording the Rubber Soul album. Something to note, around Christmas of 1965 is when the Rubber Soul album was actually released. The Beatles did a fantastic job coming up with possibly the greatest rock and roll album of all time within about 6 weeks or so. At any rate, after about 1964, 1965, the Beatles decided that they didn't want to record other people's music anymore. They wanted everything to be original, and they did this almost, with a few exceptions along the way. Well, sometimes they also needed to take a little bit of inspiration from some songs that they didn't write themselves. And a perfect example of this is Run For Your Life, in which John sings, "I'd rather see you dead, little girl, than to be with another man." That comes from a song called Baby Let's Play House. Now, the Beatles at first heard it after Elvis Presley did it. He did it in 1955. It's a Yellow Sun record from Nashville. The year before that, a guy named Arthur Guntry wrote it, and he recorded it. Elvis covered his version and had a huge hit with it. Well, in the song, the singer is so dedicated to the relationship that he's willing to kill the girl because he would not want to see her with another man. Now, this is extremely chauvinistic and misogynistic, and as John Lennon got older, he had a real bad distaste for this song, primarily because he grew as a person. But in 1965, he was willing to kill the girl for the sake of rock and roll. As we will talk about throughout all the songs, especially on Rubber Soul, there's a whole bunch of tambourines. Now, after they recorded the initial track, which is Ringo and Paul playing the drums and the bass, an electric guitar from George and an acoustic guitar from John, they added a tambourine and a whole bunch of guitars. There might be up to 7 guitars played by George. There's also the John Lennon lead vocal, which is occasionally double-tracked, and then George, John, and Paul did background vocals, and then they did another round of background vocals with all 3 of them. So there's about 6 or 7 Beatles singing on the song. Now, the other song we're talking about this week is very, very different than Willing to Kill the Girl. It's called Here, There, and Everywhere, and it's a Paul McCartney song that he wrote in June of '66. There's a few different stories of how he came up with it. Apparently, John and Paul would get together at John Lennon's house, and from time to time, they would sit around and have writing sessions. They would play what they had so far. They would talk about what they had. They would give each other ideas. We also know that John Lennon slept very, very late, and apparently Paul may or may not have showed up at John's house. John was still asleep, so Paul just hung out by the pool and wrote this song. John agrees with this during some interviews, and he says that it's all Paul's. He woke up and he was almost done. Now, dear old Mel Evans says that Paul wrote the song in a hotel room earlier in 1960, or later in the year in 1964. There's all sorts of confusion as to when it was actually written. At any rate, by June of 1966, near the end of the Revolver sessions, Paul was all set to record his wonderful love song, written by Jane Asher, who was Paul's primary muse throughout the meat of Beatlemania, and a couple years after. They were together until 1968. Paul wrote this song, and he wanted it to have a Beach Boy quality with lots of oohs and ahs, like God only knows, but he also wanted it to have some rhyming that was different than a typical June Moon Spoon kind of song. The internal rhyming comes from Bob Dylan. So taking Bob Dylan and the Beach Boys, cramming it together, and shuffling it through Paul McCartney, you wind up getting a Beatles song. It's a very beautiful Beatles song. The basic track was recorded. They worked on it for hours and hours, and then they scrapped it and started again from scratch. They double-tracked Paul's lead vocals, and there's tape manipulation about this. One of them is just a little bit slower, and one is played back, and that's the one that Paul then sang with. There's all sorts of tape manipulation all over Revolver. It's pretty remarkable to take a look at it, or listen, as it were. When they did the background vocals, it's likely all three, but yet again, at this point in time when the Beatles were really learning how to use multi-track, they were really getting into recording and harmonizing with themselves. One of the things that really makes this song very interesting is that the first word of the whole song is the first word of the title, and then the first word of the second verse of the song is the second word of the title, here and then there. That's just a really interesting new way of Paul McCartney that he used to present his music, and there's a lot of good stuff presented. So enjoy your audio, make sure you do your homework, and give Here, There, and Everywhere and Run for Your Life a listen. You will not be sorry. Thank you so much. Once again, this is Professor Mop Top. You have a wonderful day.